this conference because of that reason. In terms of our panelists, we wanted to have a broad array of responsible viewpoints by this very distinguished group of panelists in order to present this issue in a balanced and objective way. And we hope that that will be the case. Unfortunately, one of the panelists is very highly respected, Edward Said, for health reasons that are well known to many of you, over the weekend announced that he was not going to be able to be with us. And so our best wishes go with him. And we're sorry about that, but we're very fortunate to have in his place Reverend Naeem Atiq of St. George's Episcopal Cathedral in Jerusalem, who has come over at the last minute. Reverend Atiq, I'd just like to thank you for this very extraordinary gesture. I'd like to introduce our moderator, who's well known to many, if not most of you, Ambassador Richard Mertv, who I'm also pleased to say is the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Middle East Institute and a senior fellow at Council of Foreign Relations. As you know, Ambassador Mertv has been ambassador to most of the places in the Middle East, it seems, and was Assistant Secretary of State for 6 years, where he dealt on a daily basis with the issues of the peace process. So, Dick, I would like to welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, Rocky, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Very pleased to be here to serve as moderator this morning with our 4 very distinguished panelists. I will not be introducing them in detail. You have brief biographies on each in your program, and I recommend you scan that. They'll be speaking in the order they're listed. Each has been asked to speak for not more than 15 minutes in the first round. We'll then have a break at 10:30. Each will then have 5 minutes to respond to the presentation of the other. They will speak the second round in the same order they did the first. After their 5-minute presentations, I will pose to them as many of the questions from the audience as time allows. Please write your questions on the note cards provided in your folder. These will be collected throughout the morning by our staff of interns. Just raise your hand and they'll come by. We will be ending the program at 12:30. I know the time limits of 15 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for reply is totally inadequate to the complexity of the subject they'll be addressing, and we'll appreciate the speaker's cooperation. And as far as your questions are concerned, I trust that some of you have come with an open mind. So I want to see some of those questions ended up after the presentation rather than before. It's a personal pleasure to be involved in this conference. For so many years serving in the American Foreign Service, I and my colleagues operated under instructions, frankly, to avoid raising the issue of the future of Jerusalem. When we would be pressed for a statement, we repeated guidance crafted in the late 70s that it would not be useful to get into a discussion of the issue because it was one that involved so many passionate positions on all sides that to get into a debate at that point in time, where the peace process was at best delicate, it would halt negotiations on other issues or even derail talks from the beginning. So, in accordance with the process set out at Camp David, we urged that the negotiations about Jerusalem be reserved until the final status negotiations. This was reaffirmed in the decisions accepted at Oslo in 1993 by the Israelis and Palestinians. On the whole, I think it's been a good thing that there's been relative silence on the part of the Americans, American officials. Although it is fair to ask that by continually pushing this issue down the road, we may have contributed to what some have called the mystification of Jerusalem. Inadvertently, we may have made the search for an agreement about its future status even more difficult. In any event, that phase is ending. Final status negotiations, which officially began last May, will, under the Hebron Agreement, resume in about 2 months, that is, some point in March. But before calling on our first speaker, I would like to underline that we have called this event today a conference, not a debate. Now, I fully expect there will be disagreements, very sharp, perhaps disagreements between our panelists. But when 12:30 comes, there will not be any winners or any losers. We hope that the presentations and the exchanges between you and the panelists about the different points of view will help bring enlightenment to us all. I call on our first speaker, Arthur Richburg.
I was thinking about this speech, of course, for a few days, and my final preparation was done at breakfast. And having had a fair idea, well, I knew exactly who would be on the platform, very serious people who've been thinking about the issues all their lives, and quite a lot of serious people in the audience. So I decided that I would not begin with some profound orotund declaration, but to tell you a football story. I don't know whether any of you remember, I spent 10 years of my life in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's where Rocky and I began together. That's where Sadak and I began together. And I remember that a football hero and later a coach, I think it was from the University of Tennessee, was a fellow named Harry Hickman. Now, Hickman was a good old boy from the South. And all of a sudden, somewhere in the mid-50s, I think it was in the mid-50s, he was surprisingly appointed the coach of the Yale football team. And the notion that Mr. Hickman of the mountains beyond Knoxville joining the Yale culture gave some people pause. When he arrived in Yale, the press was waiting for him. And he was asked how did he hope to do in his new job. The Yale football team had been losing, of course, year after year. Especially it had been losing the game to that other place. At any rate, Mr. Hickman answered that he hoped to do well enough to keep the alumni solemn, but not mutinous. I propose this principle for a discussion of this vexed, knotty, and terribly emotional question of Jerusalem. First principle, the first thesis that I want to hang on the wall of this particular cathedral or church this morning. There can be no political solution, no arrangement in Jerusalem which won't leave everybody with less than he really wants, or she really wants. There can be no Jerusalem solution, no matter what its shape, from right to left, that if it works at all, will do anything more than provide sullenness in the hope that it will avoid mutiny. And in order to illustrate the point, let's start with one of the very knotty questions. Rashid and I go back a long time. We once taught a course together at Columbia on a comparative study of Zionist and Palestinian nationalism. It was a course that we called the Zoo. And it was, but it kept peace. And we said all kinds of terrible things, generally in criticism of each other's views. And as you see, we came out of it, the dear friends that we still are. I remember once saying in class something about the superior sacredness, or the sacredness of the Hahabayat, the Temple Mountain, as central to a Jewish religious consciousness through the ages. And Rashid came back and said to me, but that's picking one stratum. It was sacred before that, prior to the Jewish conquest, etc. There is no religious claim, no spiritual claim, which will not be trumped or called into question from someone else's point of view. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. Therefore, the notion that there can be a solution to the question of Jerusalem, which will be negotiated with the major religious traditions which are concerned with Jerusalem being reasonably happy, content, etc., is a pipe dream. And let us therefore begin. I begin very radically with the proposition that we are not making peace among religions. That's their problem. Let them make it theologically. And remember, most of my life I've been a card-carrying rabbi. The religious problem is not settleable within the political context. What is settleable within the political context is some modus vivendi on shrines, holy places, in which a reasonable amount of peace will be kept. And let's not start trotting out our woes at each other, because within each of the religious traditions, one can lift the accusatory finger. The other day, after my friends in the mainline Protestant churches got through issuing a statement for shared Jerusalem, I wanted to know what they were saying between 49 and 67, when there was no Jewish access and the synagogues in East Jerusalem had all been dynamited. And back came a letter saying, what were you saying in 52 when the mosques were being dynamited in Banamini Creek? And my answer was, I personally did say more than a little something, but you're right. Point of the matter is, we can go through this exercise endlessly, and it won't do any good. It won't do any good. We are going to make settlement, if there will be settlement, on the shrines on some interreligious basis within which their sacredness and access to them will be guaranteed on the basis of equality. That is not enough to satisfy the maximalists in any of the camps. Which now leads me to my next proposition. The real issue of Jerusalem is the issue that Israel's greatest poet keeps raising, Yehuda Amichai. People live there. People live there. They go to the theater, they go to synagogue, they go to mosques, they fuss around with each other, children play ball in courtyards in which Herod built elaborate buildings, and the remains are still around. There are people living there. And those people must be given the opportunity to live their lives as freely, as decently, and as much under their own traditions and under their own rule as is humanly conceivable. It therefore means, and let me now quote the Minister of Propaganda of the Likud in the United States, Mr. Abe Rosenthal of the New York Times. Let me now quote him, an old sparring partner of mine. Let's quote him. The other day, when the Netanyahu government finally signed onto all the documents on Hebron, Mr. Rosenthal wrote quite honestly, you can call it gefilte fish as well as Palestinian Authority, but what he has signed on to is a Palestinian state. One way or another, there is going to be a Palestinian state. Now, the notion that the Arabs, the Palestinians of East Jerusalem, are Israeli citizens is a figment of Israeli political imagination. Just isn't so. Anyone who believes that should go walking on Suleiman Boulevard at about 11 o'clock at night all by himself, as he freely walks under Chaf HaPalmach in Jerusalem. You are dealing in two cultures and in two national identities. And therefore, there needs to be a political division of Jerusalem. There has to be. There has to be the recognition that you are dealing with two national identities which essentially have quite different perceptions of where they want to be and where they ought to be. Which then raises the question, that famous and vexed question of shall there be an Arab capital, a Palestinian capital in Jerusalem? If in 1947-48 there had been an acceptance of partition rather than war, that's precisely where we would be probably now with goodwill. But what is it, 4 or 6 wars later, even specialists, and I'm a Sunni specialist, have lost count of whether we call things wars or major actions, etc. In the situation in which there is at least as much bad will as there is goodwill, there has to be, to make it possible for the thing to work at all, there has to be some amount of separation. It also has to be politically possible. I do not imagine, I know Israel reasonably well, I will ask Rocky and Dick to bear witness to the fact that I know it reasonably well. You could not get a majority in Israel. You could not get through a Knesset under liberal management if Shimon Peres were suddenly translated and transported back into office. There still won't be an Arab capital on Suleiman Boulevard. It ain't gonna be. The closest you can get to it is the formula that the fertile mind of Yossi Beilin has invented, that the border of Jerusalem be extended and there be a Palestinian capital in something of the order of Abu Dis. And again, I know that there are people who are already quietly frothing at this last sentence and saying, how dare he say so? Well, I dare say so precisely because I've argued the liberal and the flexible side of things within the Jewish community for half a lifetime. I dare say so because politics is the pact of the possible. And whether you have at this moment a Palestinian capital in Abu Dis, or in Suleiman Boulevard is really the issue of whether you're going to have it at all in foreseeable time. Which now leads me to the very last consideration. Is peace worth making? Is peace worth making? Because there is a very well-developed opinion on the Israeli side. And I suspect you will hear some of it later from colleagues, that what you accomplish by making peace with the Palestinians, or with some of them, led by Arafat, is that you give back X, Y, and Z, you create additional positions of power, influence, territorial spread, and that this, in the mass mind or the continuing consciousness of Palestinians, of the Arab Muslim community, for that matter, the Arab Christian community, is the first installment on asking some more questions. Dick, do I still have 2 minutes? 1 more minute. All right. I'm an inveterate reader of Haaretz. Get it on Friday. Same day it arrives, it comes in Israel. And last Friday's Haaretz, I discovered that an old friend of ours, Rocky, Crown Prince Hussein, has been financing, Hassan, has been financing a register being organized, I think, in Orient House, of 4,000 claims on territorial return of territory and assets in West Jerusalem. Now, there is therefore a well-developed opinion in Israel that all that you are doing is handing back Israel in installments. It's an opinion I do not share. I think that there is a point at which there is a pragmatic, non-ideological, for the sake of life, set of arrangements which makes it possible for at least some of those who want to make war to go away. Last sentence. I have absolutely no hope that in our lifetime, that is, in the next couple of, in mine at least, I'm in my mid-70s, there is going to be the ultimate sultan. It ain't going to be. What I do have hope for is that pragmatically, bit by bit, we defuse a few situations, including the situation of Jerusalem, so that, in God's own good time, there will be a change of heart. All that we can do with human wisdom is cool it a little bit, and hoping that it will cool some more. Thank you very much.